Our project looks at how AI models handle contested public topics, the kind of questions where there's real legal and political disagreement, not just a single correct answer. As people increasingly turn to AI to summarize information instead of reading original sources themselves, the sources these models choose to include or choose to leave out can quietly shape how people end up understanding those issues. That's the problem we wanted to actually measure instead of just assume. To measure this, we took 5 legally and politically contested topics: abortion rights, gun control, the Israel Palestine conflict, Taiwan's political status, and the South China Sea disputes, and ran an identical prompt across ChatGPT, Claude, DeepSeek, and Gemini, logging the model's exact responses. For every response, we extracted and categorized every cited source into government, international, academic, news, or other, and then calculated various measures.
Our first metric is Shannon entropy, which measures the diversity of source categories used in a response. So rather than simply counting the number of citations, the Shannon entropy considers how evenly citations are distributed across government sources, international organizations, research facilities, news, and other sources. So a higher entropy would indicate that the model draws from a more balanced mix of institutional perspectives, while a lower entropy suggests that the model relies heavily on one or two source categories. For example, in our results, Gemini and Claude achieved the highest entropy, which indicates that they have the greatest diversity in their responses, whereas ChatGPT relied much more heavily on just one category, which is government sources.
This is the third metric, citation breadth. A simple question. Of 5 source categories, how many does each model actually draw from? Gemini scores the highest at 4.4 out of 5. ChatGPT lowest at 1.8, fewer than 2 categories per answer. Breadth, it doesn't necessarily mean quality. This is where it gets interesting. ChatGPT's narrowest is concentration in primary sources. Courts, statutes, and government bodies account for 88% of its citations. On the South China Sea, it cited the Permanent Court of Arbitration's award directly. Gemini's breadth, by contrast, is padded with encyclopedia and secondary commentary. On that same question, nearly half of its sources here were Wikipedia, and it cited no legal authority at all. So the same number supports opposite conclusions depending on what you value. Breadth alone rewards a model for citing widely but shallowly. That's why we read it alongside our primary source measure, and why neither numbers mean much on their own. This chart is a primary authority ratio. Out of every source a model cited, what share actually pointed to primary original document rather than a secondary write-up or an aggregator? And the spread is wide. ChatGPT sits right near the top, around 0.93. Almost everything it cited traced back to an original source. DeepSeek and Gemini land in the middle, both around 0.54, so a roughly even split. Claude is a clear outlier at the bottom, down near 0.12. It leaned overwhelmingly on secondary sources. The takeaway isn't that one model wins. A high ratio isn't automatically better. Primary sources carry more authority, but secondary ones often do the work of context and synthesis. What's striking is the sheer differences. Ask the same questions on 4 different LLMs and the type of evidence you get back changes dramatically, depending which one you opened.
The main takeaway is that there are substantial and systematic variation in both source diversity and institutional reliance when you're consulting different large language models with the same set of legally and politically contested questions. For example, ChatGPT concentrates on mostly government and court sources to the point of pretty much near monoculture on some topics, and Claude concentrates morely on academic and uncategorized sources. It also shows us the lowest primary authority reliance. Gemini shows the more balanced institutional spread, and DeepSeek kind of falls in between. So these findings really indicate that the source concentration in AI-generated answers is measurable and very model-specific. which has very direct implications for how future transparency and disclosure requirements should be designed.